Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Greer Luce. I am the Curator of Education and Public Programs here at Morven, and I just want to welcome you again to Morven Museum and Garden for this awesome Love Your Leaves program that we're doing with Sustainable Princeton in partnership with Sustainable Princeton. So I'm not going to stand up here too long. I just want to thank Sustainable Princeton for organizing this event with us. As a property that preserves the natural landscape as well as the historic landscape here in Princeton, it's really important for us to be looking towards sustainable education and ways that we can better help our environment and our community. And our partnership with Sustainable Princeton is really helping us to do that, so we're very grateful. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to the Executive Director of Sustainable Princeton, Christine Symington. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greer, and hello and welcome to everyone on attending virtually. I just want to say what a pleasure it's been to work with Morven and with the Master Gardeners in organizing this event. You know, it's through partnerships and collaboration, you know, that we'll be able to work together as a community to make our community more sustainable. Just a quick 2-second introduction about Sustainable Princeton. So we're a nonprofit who works within the community, and one of our missions is to help protect our local ecosystem. We have wonderful organizations in the town like Morven, Friends of Harringtown Woods, Friends of Princeton Open Space, DNR Greenway, Charles Rogers Refuge, and the Ridgeview Conservancy, who are doing a terrific job of managing our open spaces. And so, but all of our ecosystem is connected, so it's really important that private property owners, homeowners, and commercial property owners see their yards and their grounds as part of that larger ecosystem. So one of our areas of focus is to have educational events like this to help us all learn these tools and skills of how we can have our little patch of what we have of our own to make it more sustainable and contribute to the goals of making our ecosystem more resilient to climate change, protect habitat diversity. And leaves is one of those topics where because Princeton has a lot of beautiful trees and a lot of leaves, that it's a topic where we can really do something to look at them as an asset rather than a nuisance. So thank you so much for coming, and again, thanks to Morven and to the Master Gardeners for working with us on this. Thanks. I'm going to hand it over to Louise or Greer. Okay.
Thank you so much, Christine. And I just wanted to do a quick introduction for our amazing speaker today, who is Morven's horticulturist and a master gardener herself. So now we're going to hand things over to Louise Sr. Thank you, Louise.
Hello, everybody. Oh, thank you, Joe. Give a big hand to Joe Murphy, our tech guru here. He doesn't get enough of our appreciation. It's just wonderful having him do this. That said, Joe, it's not showing on my screen. It's up there, but it's not here. Yay, perfect. See, it's magic. Okay. So today, though I do work here at Morven, I also am an active Master Gardener, and I'm presenting today on behalf of the Master Gardeners of Mercer County. We're part of Rutgers Cooperative Extension, which exists to get research and information out from our state research university to the citizens of each of our counties in the state, and actually counties all over the United States. All of our programming is in accordance with anti-discrimination policies. We're here for everybody, as is Morven, of course, but this is just the little bit there. And just in case any of you are interested in becoming a Master Gardener, you can find out a lot more about this at the web link above on this slide, and I think it's also on your handout as well. Up on the top right. The requirements to become a Master Gardener are to complete a training course and then complete a group of hands-on practical training projects and working in a helpline office, answering questions, and also working with educational activities. It's a lot of fun. You should check us out. The more the merrier. And it's not too late, probably, to get into the new class that's going to start in early October. So if any of you are interested, you should contact our brand new coordinator, Justine Gray, through the websites that are on your paper. So thank you all for joining us on this rainy fall day as the leaves are starting to fall here. We're happy to be sharing this talk with Sustainable Princeton and our community. Catherine Horrigan, another Master Gardener, and I developed this talk way back in 2014, and I can't believe almost 10 years later, here I am giving it again. So I just wanted to give Catherine due credit as my co-author, and she hails from the UK, so sadly you're not going to enjoy her lovely British accent, which is always a boon to garden presentations. You're stuck with my Jersey girl accent. So most of us living in Mercer County have a lot of leaves to contend with starting around now or maybe next month. Oh, okay. Nice ring. Okay, starting around this time of year, and many of our streets start to look like this. Okay, so you can see. So leaf management becomes a big chore for a lot of us, both for homeowners and for our communities. You know, most of us pay taxes, so we're interested in that. Many streets become navigation nightmares as we try to drive or bike through narrow gauntlets sometimes of leaf piles. Leaves can be slippery underfoot, on sidewalks, on driveways, streets, and parking lots. So today I want to offer up some alternatives to just raking all of your leaves into, or blowing them into the street for municipal pickup, which I know not all townships have, possibly, but here in Princeton, Lawrence, our neighboring communities, we have a lot of people that, you know, the municipalities pick up the leaves. So I'm just going to try to give you some alternatives. Our original talk was centered around these sort of 7 different management strategies. And I'm going to describe these methods today. So you can read. I don't need to read these off to you. I think they're also on your handouts. Your green handout, by the way, has links on it that I just double checked this morning to make sure, because when you write a program in 2014 and it's now 2023, something changes on the internet, and even all the Rutgers fact sheets had different links. So these are all updated. I can't guarantee how long they'll stay updated, but if you look at them today, they're probably there. So you don't need to write some of those things down as I talk. So, but first, why should we bother keeping leaves on our properties? The first reason is that it's the natural way that soil is created and enriched in wild landscapes. Leaves fall in our forests and create rich, fertile soil every year with absolutely no intervention from humans. Why would we ever want to give away all that rich, fertile soil? Well, one reason is that, as you can see in the upper photo, our forests don't have lawns. They don't have turf growing under the trees. And so if we left all the leaves that fall in some of our properties on the grass, the leaf litter might become so thick that the turf will die. And most of us don't want that. Though some people now are trying to give up on their lawns. And this is a book called Lawn Gone. And this is, you know, there are strategies for getting rid of your lawn. I won't really talk about those too much today. The message here is that we should leave the leaves in particular places on our properties to build and feed our soil. Ecologically, leaving leaves benefits wildlife enormously by protecting beneficial insects over the winter. So if you vacuum up every leaf on your whole landscape and ship them away through the municipality, that interrupts the food web for insects such as bees and butterflies, and also for the birds that feed on them. We don't think of butterflies as being food, but birds eat a lot of their caterpillars. Even insects like millipedes that break down plant debris, ladybugs and spiders that provide pest control for us. They're out there doing our work, hard work, killing the bad bugs for us in the spring and summer. But they need those leaf piles so that they can have their larvae grow and overwinter. A lot of us now are concerned with the dwindling firefly or lightning bug population. Their larvae also overwinter in soil and in leaf litter. And sometimes they require as up 18 months or even more for their larvae to become adults. So they need some places, they need some leaf piles around to make their home. And also, those larvae, the lightning bug larvae at least, are predatory. So they're out there dining on other larvae and worms and snails sometimes. And this is just really important because those predatory insects help us keep some of our bad bugs in check, under control. So it's all important. Another reason we should bother to leave our leaves is to reduce the need for fertilizer on our lawns. That's the little white chemical being poured into a spreader on our lawns and gardens. Back in 2011, New Jersey passed legislation making the use of fertilizers containing nitrogen and or controlling the use of nitrogen and phosphorus on home landscapes. They were being overused. Most of them were being washed away into our streets and then down into our rivers and streams and causing problems there. And so now it's actually illegal in New Jersey to fertilize your lawns between November 15th and April 1st with those chemical fertilizers. By managing your leaves at home and in mowing your leaves into your lawns, you can help reduce the need for those fertilizers, and you can save money too. You don't have to buy that stuff. Keeping your leaves closer to where they fall reduces energy expenditure, and this is near and dear, of course, to Sustainable Princeton's heart. And again, it saves you money, saves all of us money in taxes. And it keeps them out of landfills, which again, New Jersey passed a law way back in 1990 banning the disposal of leaves and yard trimmings into landfills. This was incentive for many municipalities to start composting facilities for leaves and brush. Princeton and Lawrenceville share a site at the Mayer Ecological Center out on Princeton Pike. I'm pointing over there because that's the direction of it. And it's a terrific example of municipalities in cooperation for sustainable uses, but they do drive around and pick it up and take it over there, and then they come back and deliver it sometimes. But raking the massive piles of leaves into our streets and towns to collect has caused problems with stormwater drains. We're getting more and more of our rainfall in the fall with climate shifts, and the leaves can really clog up our drains. In Princeton, this has really exacerbated some of our fall flooding in recent years. Some towns have tried to regulate this by requiring the use of leaf bags, which you see here. They don't, they usually don't make it into a leaf drain or a storm drain to clog it. Other towns sometimes use straw bales as blocks to keep leaves out of the storm drains. But another reason is really just sheer economics. I don't have an exact figure for the cost of managing residential leaves each fall here in Princeton, but a few years ago, I asked our Public Works Department for a figure, and they said, well, we can't really pin it down specifically, but the head of Public Works told me that there were essentially 43 workdays a year devoted to leaf collection and scheduled for the fall. And that's between early October and, almost mid-December. On each of these days, there's a crew of at least 4 employees and a lot of heavy equipment that goes out to collect bagged leaves and loose leaves. And they do that all day long on those days. For about 3 weeks during peak leaf season, late October to early November, they'll run 2 or 3 4 to 6 person crews going around collecting leaves. So obviously we pay for all that in our taxes. And I think that our municipal workers could probably be doing some other things instead. I'm not saying that they should be, that the staff should be cut. I think that they could be deployed to fix sidewalks, do some road maintenance, all those potholes and things. There's tree work. There's lots of other work that they could be doing, and we could maybe even get our taxes a little bit lower. So way back, again, when one of the inspirations for this talk initially was an article in the New York Times, and the link is on this handout, I think on the back. Back in 2013 in Westchester, New York, a town published that they spent $3.5 million a year. That's that is 10 years ago. So 10 years ago dollars, $3.5 million a year with private contractors who went around and hauled away leaves in tractor trailers, and they took them off to commercial composting sites in places like Orange County, New York, and Connecticut. And people, lobbied, and they realized that this was a crazy waste of money, and they launched a Love 'em and Leave 'em campaign, much like Sustainable Princeton has been pursuing here in Princeton, to try to cut costs and improve local ecology. And they really have saved millions of dollars in the last decade. So there we go. Okay, so before I go on, there are sometimes some leaves that we might not want to keep on our properties. Some people are, actually most of us, are sensitive to poison ivy, poison oak, sumac, so you would prefer not to compost them or collect them, and not to handle them too much in your yard. Also, black walnut leaves contain an element called juglone, and this inhibits plant growth. Most of the juglone is actually in their roots and in the nut hulls, but the leaves do contain some. So if you know that you have mainly black walnut tree leaves in your leaf pile, you probably don't want to use those on your beloved perennial bed, and things like that, because they will inhibit growth of plants. In municipal compost or most home compost, the percentage of them is very small and they get diluted down, so you don't have to worry about those. Generally, you'd prefer to dispose of diseased plant material too, rather than put it in your compost pile. Things like if you are a vegetable gardener, and if your tomatoes look like they got a blight of some kind, you probably don't want to put those vines and things into your compost. Cucumbers and summer and winter squash sometimes get squash bugs, and you might not want to put those eggs into your compost either. And then sometimes there's mildews or diseases on plants. Even though we're not supposed to put the bulk of our leaves into our municipal trash, it's okay to bundle up things like poison ivy or a few select items and throw them out. And that's what I would advise to most of you. Also, if you know that something has just recently been treated with an herbicide or pesticide, you might want to avoid using those in your mulch. But spraying on fruit trees usually happens months before any of the leaves fall. It's usually more of a spring regimen, and those have generally broken down sufficiently so you don't have to worry about putting them into your compost if you use those kinds of things. Higher lignin containing leaves, that's sort of really tough leaves like beech, birch, hornbeam, some oaks, chestnut, magnolia leaves, holly leaves. These take more time to break down. They're pretty big. And I would advise that they're really truly better shredded, but that could come at the cost of losing some of your insect life. But if they've just fallen, you can shred them because they probably haven't been, probably aren't occupied yet. So now I'm going to get into my numbers of things. That was all my caveats. Here's my first suggestion for managing your leaves on your property, and I think it's one of the easiest ones too, especially when you have somebody else, like your son, mowing your lawns. Most lawn mowers are now equipped with mulching capability, and I believe the electric lawn mowers that Sustainable Princeton is promoting would have that capacity as well. And I hope that everybody is using this already and mowing your lawns tall, leaving at least 3 inches of growth. The grass clippings are a fine way to feed your lawn, reducing your need for the expensive and sometimes banned in some seasons fertilizer. Mulch mowing is absolutely not correlated with thatching of lawns, when they get very thick and have problems growing. And this is something that you can learn a lot more from Rutgers fact sheets and Master Gardeners. It's something that's taught in our lawn care courses, that the thatching is not caused by mulching the grass clippings in. The most effective way to mulch your leaves with your lawnmower is to mow them when they're dry, and hopefully dried up a little bit too, so they've fallen and they've gotten a little crispy on your lawn. You can see my son here is mowing leaves into our lawn, and it's easiest to do when the leaves are not super thick, at least with a little home mower. Some mowers might be much more heavy duty, and you might be able to grind through bigger ones. You can do multiple passes over to keep the leaves out, keep the leaves broken down. You can see, one test is you can look down and see green grass. And this is a caveat also. If you're mulching your leaves with your lawnmower, when you look down after you've taken a pass and you look down at your foot and you can see plenty of green grass and some leaf particles, that's good. If the leaves are so shredded that you don't see any grass, then you need to maybe rake them up or collect them, because that grass is probably not going to grow so well up through those. So just do a common sense test looking at them that way. There are heavy duty mowers, and we've been experimenting the last 2 years, grinding some of our leaves here at Morven to use. I like to use them as mulch on our vegetable beds, but we have a pile where the leaves get put in the fall on our front lawn. And my colleague Charlie brings in his hand lawnmower, and we've been trying to test how much time his way of just taking the lawnmower over and over and over them versus my other methods. And we're pretty much about even, but you can just mow them in place. You just might have to take extra passes over it. Another thing, after weeding, so for another use of your leaves, after weeding, it's important to try to stop the reappearance of your leaves, of your weeds. So adding a layer of shredded leaves helps keep the weeds at bay by suppressing the germination of those weed seeds that get disturbed when you pull them out. It also has other beneficial effects. Just like with your lawn, it helps build better soil structure in your garden beds, and the leaves break down and they provide very good cover. Even the shredded ones will provide some cover and shelter for wildlife. This is an area. You don't have to shred them. You can also just rake the leaves onto a flower garden. This is a great way to provide wildlife shelter. That's insect shelter for your gardens. Some people are afraid that they blow around. I have not had problems with that, but if you have a high visibility bed, I'd recommend maybe shredding the leaves and putting them down as mulch, because it tends to look a little tidier to people. And I don't find the shredded leaves, I've never had problems with them blowing around. If most of your leaves are very flat, such as maple leaves have a tendency to lie very flat on each other and they form a thick mat. You might want to stir them up so that you might not want to rake those right into a bed or leave them there, because they really will form a very thick mat and suppress growth of things around them. And so that's another reason why I go in and shred some leaves. Here's the bed, the first bed that I showed with just the little hose after weeding, and then here it is covered with some shredded leaves so that they don't form a mat. And that's just the idea for your public places. It looks a little tidier. I also think leaves are wonderful for vegetable gardens. And when you're putting your garden to bed for the winter, because most of us don't leave vegetable plants up, for insects in the fall, like we might do with our perennial and flower gardens. first I clean up the beds, removing last season's plants, anything diseased, any weeds. Then I add amendments such as green sand, which is mined here in New Jersey, or azomite for potassium and extra trace elements. And then I put in a layer of compost, finished compost, leaf compost on top, and then sometimes even some composted manure to feed the vegetable beds. Then I seal it with wet newspapers, as I think you saw in a previous part here. Just the newsprint sections, and about 4 pages thick. Believe it or not, there's a master's degree that was written about using newspaper as mulching, and they determined the thickness was best, and you can find that online somewhere. I don't have the link. But then over the newsprint, then I put the leaves on top of that, and it really helps hold in, suppress any weeds over the winter, and it keeps the soil moist. It keeps the microorganisms alive in your vegetable soil, so your soil stays alive. And it prevents outgassing of elements. As if you leave the beds uncovered, then you lose a lot of nutrition out of them, just into thin air, literally. And so this is one of the things that I love to do. If I'm planting winter crops like garlic, things that grow over the winter, then I'd leave a narrow strip of between the newspaper that's straight in the soil, plant the garlic, and then just put the shredded leaves on top of that. I wouldn't put the newspaper over the garlic. It would probably go through it, but it seems like a little bit of extra work for it. Huh? It might be biased. Yeah. I can tell you stories about children working with newspaper, and sometimes they don't want to put certain pictures down because they think it'll not inspire things to grow. Okay. So you can also use your fall leaves, and this is all in the same kind of idea. Several years ago, there was a method called lasagna gardening that was popularized by Patricia Lanza in her book. It was published in 1998, and it's up here. And the idea, as you can see in this diagram, is you alternate layers of browns and greens, which if you compost, you may be familiar with those ideas. Greens are things like veggie scraps and garden clippings. Browns are shredded leaves in this talk, and you can use other things for browns. You can shred up newspaper and other things like that as well. I top off the lasagna garden with a nice layer of compost, and then you can often plant directly into that top layer, or you can just let it sit through the winter and it'll be all ready for planting in the spring. I like to do the lasagna gardens planning sort of now, in the fall. I think it's a good time to get them set up and let them go. And because that's when I have all the leaves to use. So, and here are 2 flower beds that I made at my house using this lasagna gardening method around the bases of trees in my yard. And you have to remember not to build the soil up too high. You always want to see that flare, the root flare of trees. You don't want to go beyond that for the health of your trees. But I wanted to have garden beds around the trees to help protect them from string trimmers and lawnmower damage, because they can, when you mow right up to the tree, you can damage the bark. So these are things, and that's, I think they worked very nicely, doing lasagnas around my trees like this. My co-author, Catherine Horgan, that I mentioned, created a new garden bed in her old house using a modified lasagna garden. She started it in the fall, and in the top right, let's see, the top right picture was taken the following year in early summer. She had already planted some shrubs, including some oak leaf hydrangeas. The bottom right picture was taken the following summer, and you can see it was pretty successful. Things grew like crazy, and she was not weeding grass out of it at all. It really did smother the grass. Her steps, she wanted to work with materials that she had on hand rather than buying a bunch of stuff. And she just had new windows fitted into her house. And so she had all this cardboard. These days, unlike 10 years ago, most people have a lot of cardboard around from your Amazon deliveries. but she wetted down the cardboard and put those down first on the lawn. Then she covered them, the damp cardboard, with as many leaves as she could get her hands on, and then compost and a little bit of topsoil. She did not use food scraps like Patricia Lanza recommends in her lasagna gardening book, because she has a dog. And she has an unruly dog who would, if there were food scraps, would just revel in digging them up and eating them. So she left the food scraps out. And this was a very successful method for her. When she moved a few years later, she did it again in her new house, and it worked just as well. So it wasn't a one-time thing. We mentioned before that putting leaves on your beds improves the soil. There's actually scientific proof of this from several years ago now. It's not just our observation. The research was done by the late Daniel Kolchinsky of Rutgers, who kindly allowed me to use his slides. And this is what the soil looked like with no leaf amendments added. So you can see leaves 0 inch. It's kind of dry, there's cracks in it. It was an open farm field. And there was a 3-year study period where farmers added 6 inches of leaves, just a full 6 inches of leaves every year. And they were uncomposted leaves. They were just fresh, from the fall pickups in the three-year study. The soil changed dramatically, through this process. Organic matter, of course, increased, along with soil tilth, and the moisture holding capacity was greatly increased. Soil tilth, by the way, is the state of aggregation. I'm reading a definition here. The state of aggregation of a soil, especially in relation to its suitability for crop growth. It's kind of a combination of how dense the particles are and how much water it holds. It's an old-fashioned term, tilth. So these leaves were only placed on top of the fields. They were not turned in. They were not plowed in or anything like that. Nobody went out there and turned them, like your compost pile, anything like that. There is a fact sheet from Rutgers. It's fact sheet 822. I think there's a link to that on your handout, and that describes it. So there's also several other Rutgers fact sheets about using leaf compost in the home landscape and all of these things. Our fourth method for using up leaves is to use them as cover for tender crops, tender plants. My co-author, Catherine, pots up bulbs, and she enters the Philadelphia Flower Show most years. The Philadelphia, and it's returning to March timeframe again this year, so she'll be doing it again. And this is a way of forcing bulbs. She pots the bulbs up, and then she puts them in the window well at her house, those sort of aluminum things, right? Giving basement light kind of things. She puts her pots in there, plants the bulbs, waters them lightly, puts them in. And she then rakes her leaves or moves them fills them up, buries them in the leaves. And this keeps them from actually freezing, but they do get cold enough to have their growth spark so that she can force them. You have to bring them into the heat after certain numbers of weeks, depending on the bulb variety, to get them to bloom. So if, she usually stows hers away in mid to late October for the flower show, depending on the bulb and what it needs. If you want to get flowers by Valentine's Day, maybe tulips or something like that, you might want to move it up, maybe put them in late September. We recommend that if you want to have your flowers blooming by a certain date, forcing them, that you do several pots, maybe one every week or every 5 days over a period of time, just so that you can get a good window. One of them will be blooming on the day that you wanted it to. So, and that's what she does. That's how she gets her ribbons at the flower show, by doing that. No, she doesn't. No, they're in pots. Yeah, they're in flower pots. Well, for the ones that she forces, yeah. The ones that she forces for the flower show or other things. Yeah, she buys them pots. And she does say that if most of us are probably just going to go to a local store, Ace Hardware or wherever, and get bulbs. But if you're ordering a specific variety, if that's important to you, like it needs to be for the competitions at the flower show, you need to tell the online or mail order bulb supplier that you want them right away, because otherwise they'll not send them to you until it's the right time to plant them outside, which might be late October or November. So, but it's a good way to, it's another way to use leaves that people don't always think about. And here is Narcissus Topolino, and that was one of her prize winners. So that's the result of a little pot buried in a windowsill, window well. Excuse me?
I'd say a lot of pots.
Well, no, it's one pot with those bulbs planted densely. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just assume that everybody goes to the Philadelphia Flower Show because I do. But I know that, yeah, they have a big competition area where people, bring in their items, and that's what this is about. So again, more on cover for tender plants. You can, it's not just bulbs that are tender. Tender perennials, if any of you grow agapanthus, which cannot freeze here, that can be buried. Rosemary tends to be kind of susceptible to our New Jersey winters, and it could benefit from being buried in leaves, some insulation. Lavenders sometimes benefit it. They'll like the protection. If you have newly planted roses, like we have right out here in our newly, there's a little bird bath outside. We have new roses there. I intend to cover the root crowns with leaves to just give them some insulation because they aren't mature enough yet. Their root systems won't be deep enough to live through potentially some of those freeze-thaw cycles that we get here. And we're getting more and more of them. With more warm days in the winter, things heat up and then they freeze again. And that constant fluctuation is really hard on our plant roots. And you can help protect your perennials and, climbing roses, other roses. Yes?
This idea of putting the leaves in the window well, does that in any way, if you have all those leaves, does that make a nice warm home for like mice that you would want there?
I'm sure it could. And they might want to eat the tulips as well. I'm not sure. Catherine hasn't had any problems with that. I've done it a couple of times at my house and I didn't have any problems with it. But the question for those online, if you didn't hear it in our ambient sound, was that putting leaves as in your window wells, might that encourage mice or other mammals to move in? And it could, but I have not had direct experience with that myself. So, okay, yes?
I just wanted to ask, what role do invasives play? Like, does it matter if some of these leaves are not the kind of leaves that would plants that would offer the food that the native animals?
I don't think that that's an issue. I think that's very interesting. Again, for online, the question was, what role does invasive, whether a plant's invasive or not, or I guess, not necessarily invasive, but non-native. I think we're generally going for the macronutrients that are in those leaves. The carbon, the nitrogen, the potassium, higher level things as they break down. I have not heard anybody say that it matters of that. Of course, if there's seeds in there and your compost doesn't get hot enough, they may spring up all over the place, and that could happen. But okay, so I'll go on. And I'd like to, I think Greer and Christine might want me to take questions at the end just to make sure, or are you okay with it? Okay, so we'll see. We'll keep going. Okay, so this was about protecting things. Also asparagus. I love putting layers of leaves over my asparagus beds to insulate the root crowns. And then that way I can peel back some of the leaves early in the spring and I get the first crop of asparagus, and you can pull it back. You can kind of unveil it bit by bit so that you don't get all your asparagus at once. But that takes a little practice, but it's kind of fun. A layer of shredded leaves is also a great way to extend the season, especially of your vegetable patches. past frost. There's a garden author named Nikki Jabor who recommends using actually a 1-foot layer of leaves, shredded leaves, before frost over all of your root vegetables. If you still have carrots or turnips, other root crops in the ground, she says to just bury them in these. And this will prevent the ground around these. They're cold tolerant crops anyway, but it keeps the ground from freezing so the vegetables themselves won't freeze and then rot. And she lives up in Nova Scotia, so she knows about cold weather and lots of, months and months of snow, cold weather. If you're in a windy location, you can use a sheet of row cover or even just a sheet like this to kind of go over it. This is pinned down with landscape staples, because if you have a big mound in a small spot, they really might all blow away. So you can put them in that way. As I mentioned earlier, I find that shredded leaves generally stay put, but I don't think I've ever put a full foot on top of anything either, and that might blow away. So this way you might actually be able to go out and harvest fresh, delicious carrots and beets on Thanksgiving morning, even Christmas or holidays, New Year's, so you can do this. Kale and spinach are also very cold hardy, and they can be protected by layers of leaves as well through the winter. If you run out of leaves, you can use straw or shredded straw, like you might use on a new lawn, seeded lawn, to be an insulator. I personally don't bury cabbage because I've found that voles, very cute little furry animals that are vegetarian, they look a lot like mice but with bigger ears. I find that they seem to eat cabbage in my life, and you don't know the cabbage is eaten until you pick it out, till you harvest it, and it's been hollowed out in the middle, like something you'd put dip in at a party. And it's been a big surprise. So, but for other things like kale, spinach, things like that, it seems to work pretty well. Another thing that you can do with your leaves, and this is another, super easy thing, and I think kind of a lazy way, is to make your own leaf mulch or leaf compost. About 19 years ago, when I first moved to Princeton, we had just moved in. We'd moved here from Arizona, though I grew up in New Jersey. And we were prepping for a big family party, so we were running around. Everybody was coming for the first time, and we had leaves all over the place in the fall. And so we quick put them in bags, and I shoved them in back out of sight at the back of our property, behind some big viburnum bushes. And I promptly forgot about them, but it looked tidy for the in-laws, so who probably didn't even care. But anyway, in the spring, several months later, I found the bags, and I was amazed. They had not been closed tightly because I was in a big rush, and the leaves had composted down on their own. There was plenty of leaf mold on there that got it going. They can't be closed. They need to have moisture. They need to have water for this to work. But I actually had these nice bags. There were some big lumps in there too, but it was really pretty great leaf compost after about 6 months without doing anything. A friend of mine, I had used black trash bags. A friend of mine says that she always uses clear bags, believes that works better, but it's something to try. You might want to even poke holes in the bags just to make sure that they get the moisture. So that's another thing. Okay. Yeah, okay. So some people driving around, you start to see bags like this around Halloween. So you could maybe even use some of these as decoration, fill them up with leaves. And then I have never tried this, but you might want to try poking some holes in these and putting them out of sight, unless you don't mind looking at it, and seeing if they compost down. There's a little bit of a caution here, though, because these bags are pretty thin. They're very, very thin plastic, so they might not hold up to being lifted and transported around. And also in the spring, if the bag breaks, you might have little shreds of plastic in your compost, and I don't like that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's the thing, but it might be bright orange, so you could see it and pick it out. So I tend to use heavier bags. Yes? I often, when I put the leaves out, I don't add moisture to it. I just let them be open to the rain because it's happening in the fall for the most part. And then hopefully in the winter, there's some snow too. And so we get a fair amount of rain usually in the fall. It's our rainiest time. So I've never measured it. Yeah. Kind of open. Like rolled open some. I've never tried this just with paper bags. I don't see why it wouldn't work, but the paper bags would probably fall apart in compost too, so. They last, yeah. Okay. If you have the time and the geography, the space on your properties, you can do the same thing without a bag. It might even work better, just making a leaf pile. And if you don't mind, mind having it there, you can just use the leaves and just let them stay there and see what happens. Most people say that they do compost down within, by the next year. Yeah. And it's just that if you only live on, 1/10 of an acre, you might not have that space. But if you have a bigger property, you might have somewhere where you can just rake everything and let it sit and let it stay. And it's very easy. It's kind of the lazy way to do it, but it's pretty great. You can then just go out in the spring and put it into a bucket or a wheelbarrow and add it to your flower beds, different places. Or if you don't even want to use it, you can just then start putting more leaves on top of it. I personally would not mix in brush and other things because the wood is going to be hard. It'll take a lot longer to break down. So anyway, I like the, move it and let it sit kind of mode often. Another thing, until now, I've only mentioned basically broadleaf leaves, but a lot of us, don't forget about the evergreens out there. Our white pines, in particular, drop their needles. They'll start dropping them probably pretty soon if they haven't already. And you can use them either directly in your compost or you can use them straight. Sometimes online you'll read that, their pH is harmful, but I would not worry about that. Your compost will self-regulate it. The pH won't be a problem. And there are acid-loving plants. If you grow blueberries or ostrich ferns, think about the plants in the pine barrens or up in the Delaware Water Gap. That's where the needles fall naturally. And those plants thrive. In my life, they've thrived by being mulched with pine needles. I also really like to make a path. I have a very muddy path, shady, it never sees sun, along the side of my house. And I go around and I collect pine needles from the street in front of neighbors because I don't have a white pine tree myself. It's a little kooky. I don't do it under the cover of darkness. Nobody minds if I take their pine needles. Sometimes I go over to my congregation because they just fall onto the parking lot and they're really easy to rake up on a dry day. And I put them in. And I find that it has made a very nice path here, and I can dream that it's a little woodland path covered with pine needles that don't actually fall off of the tree, making it shady next to them. There are places around the country that consistently use pine needles as mulch, especially in the southern United States, where they call it pine straw, and people buy pine straw. So this is one of the elements where it's really not seen as a problem with the pH. Some people think they blow around. The area where I put them doesn't get much wind. It's protected, so I don't have a problem with them blowing around either. So there we go, galloping on. Of course, if you're composting, and I think we're getting closer and closer, there's some states like Vermont that require people to compost at home to keep all your food waste, manage it yourself. If you're composting, leaves are a fabulous resource to help your food break down. And this is one of the favorite things that I do with our fall leaves as well. So I just have to keep them in the, because by the time I'm going through food and waste in spring and summer, I've run out of leaves unless I've saved them. And so So you need to plan to have the leaves for your compost. They take up a lot less space if you shred them, because, you can see here, there's 4 bins of leaves. When I shredded them, they came out, all 4 of those bins equal this bin, 1 bin. So it's a much more compact way to store the leaves for your use. So how do you shred them? Well, there's a couple of different ways. You could win the shredder that's being given away today, which is a wonderful thing. And here's my friend co-author Catherine Horgan's husband using a different variety, but it's one that fits, that you can set right onto a barrel and dump leaves into it. I have often used our leaf blower. It has a switch where I can make it into like a vacuum. You can make it run backwards, and then it'll collect the leaves and shred them and store them into a bag, and then I can just put them onto garden. It's a very neat and tidy way to then put the shredded leaves onto a garden bed or something like that. If you do that, I'd recommend, it's really loud, so you might want to have ear protection, something like that. Another thing that I do, which is might be a little extreme, but again, I like to use the tools that I already have. And I have a leaf, a trimmer. My British friend calls it a strimmer. Yeah, and I use it, like you can see here, it's like a giant immersion blender. I put the dry leaves in and you just go up and down, and it doesn't take very much time at all. It just shreds them all down to tiny little bits. So you just have, again, you should wear eye protection because bits will fly out at you, and you should probably protect your ears as well. But if you're only doing it for 5 minutes, maybe it's not too much. But this is my strimming of leaves. That's 1 bucket on the left, me working the string trimmer up and down, and then that's how they all broke down to just that. So it worked well. I believe, but I have not seen any scientific studies of this. Maybe I just hope that if you gather your leaves quickly in the fall and then do this, that maybe you don't have as much insect larva danger of destruction on them. I'm hoping that then when I put, and these are leaves that I want to use in my composting anyway, so there's that. But I do believe that if you put your freshly shredded leaves on your gardens, that some of those insects will still find places for them to lay their larvae and keep the life cycle going. So this is another way just to control your leaves, is to put them in bins, sort of with a wire or snow fencing, so that you always have a supply of the leaves for composting, because you might not have enough of the big recycle bins or trash cans or whatever to keep them in. And I believe some of you might be signed up to make one of these leaf corrals today with Sustainable Princeton. So I think theirs will be round. These particular ones are square, so you can just see the different ways. And then this way you have leaves whenever you need them for your compost, and there's a little compost bin right next door. I like to have them nearby, so I dump in the kitchen scraps or food, and then I take a handful or 2 of leaves and bury them. So. Yeah, it's true. We advise, as Master Gardeners of Mercer County, we advise not to use meats, and some people even say no cooked food. But I think if it's a straight vegetable and it's cooked, I go ahead and put it in mine. There is the fear that meat might attract vermin, particularly rats and raccoons, things like that. Yeah, so we try not to use those in. Yes, yeah, you generally try not to, unless you have a system that's well closed or otherwise authorized to do that, but it's rough. And I'm not sure what they're advising to people in Vermont, if they're allowed to throw bones into the trash or not. But anyway, here's some finished compost. It's dark, beautiful, crumbly garden gold. It's a wonderful thing. So here's my last little thing, and there's some crafts out there for children. Autumn leaves are beautiful. I mean, we tend to get overwhelmed with the task of dealing with them, but they are so pretty, and you can make lots of things out of them. Most of us would be challenged to actually use all of them in craft projects that fall, but you can do lots of things. You can make garlands, you can make all kinds of things. And my family every year makes scarecrows, or at least we used to. And this is, yeah, when our kids were younger, we used their old, I kept some of their clothes, old clothes. We put a pumpkin out front before Halloween and stuff the clothes with leaves. And there's a stake going up the back to make them stand upright, because I haven't gotten them to stand up. And yeah, so we do that. My son did not, this was 10 years ago, he did not want his picture taken doing this. He's not glum. Yeah, but these are, one little glitch I've found over the last couple of years is that our leaves are not falling as reliably before Halloween anymore. The last couple of years, I literally haven't had enough leaves in my lawn to make the scarecrows. So, oh, really? That's good. But this is something. And so here's a review. Thank you very much for attending. These are the 7 different ways, and they're listed on the handout. And I do hope that you can enrich and make your home more beautiful and healthier environments. As one of my heroes, Doug Tallamy, says, we want to make every yard part of the homegrown national park. And so if you practice sustainable processes at home, you can keep everything healthier in our environment. And then these are some of the links. I think all of these are on the handout, but these are just a couple of them as well. Sometimes our lawn workers only speak Spanish, and so there is a link in there where you can find some Spanish directions if you don't speak Spanish. And then just another call out to helpline, the Master Gardener helpline. Here's the contact hours. You can contact us in different ways. You can come in person. It's down in Ewing Township during the working hours. You can call and leave a message anytime, and a Master Gardener will get back to you. Not necessarily the same day, but within a week at least. Or you can email, you can ask the MGs and get an email response. And that's a great way, because you can send a photograph of your problem now to our helpline. Or you can come visit the tent, sometimes at street fairs. I know they were here at Princeton Porch Fest in front of the library. So there's places around. So thank you again very much. Hi. Hi. Are there any questions online? I don't know. Or what's the time?
Before we do questions,
it's 3.
I wanted to just mention at the end of the Q&A, we're going to do our raffle for the electric leaf blower. So if you want to join the raffle, you can do so while we're doing Q&A, and then I'll call it at the end. So now, any questions?
Yes, I have a lot of prunings from my lavender. I wait to prune. I've been pretty successful with it. And so I wait until it's brown and the bees stop going for it, and then I deadhead.
Okay, so just the wands.
But yeah, but sometimes
The leaves too.
anyway, I have some boxes which actually still smell nice in my garage. And my plan is to put it around the, after I mulch the base of these plants that I think really need mulching, put the lavender on top. And maybe the lavender would repel.
I think, do you want to put it on the lavender itself or just everywhere? I actually think I'm with you. I think that I think that if you don't it looking like, perfectly black mulch, that'll be fine. And I'm with you. I don't know, but it sounds like it sounds very plausible to me that the scent will keep the pests away. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Sounds like you have 6. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. You're welcome. Did you, yes,
I do. So I'm not a gardener.
we're all gardeners. You just haven't started yet.
I have too many trees,
yeah.
too much shade,
Yeah.
and too many leaves. So I'm at war with my leaves. And my question for you is about volume.
You're right.
I have so many leaves
Yeah.
that I'm wondering if I have a wooded area on the edge of my property. Can I just put them there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
you
just
should
not
be
even
able
have
to.
shred
Yeah.
them or anything?
Yeah, is it an area that you can see from your house, or like, I mean, if you don't mind it, I think that that's perfectly fine. And I saw nods when I talked about piling them. Yeah, they will break down.
Like
They'll
those
fi-
time I cut everything and I just
Yeah.
honestly leave it, and within 2 to 3 days, the leaves are dead, you know, I was trying
Crunchy.
to rake them to put, you know, now they have the dates that you can put stuff out, so you
Yeah.
can put your leaves on the day that the guy is there. So I had to rake all of them into a pile, and it was like nothing, they were so light and crisp and clean, and once you start interacting with them, I'm telling you, you just realize how nutrient dense they are, and how valuable they are, you know, it will change your life.
Huh. Yeah, no, I think, Michelle, I think that's a great possibility. There are probably things that can go wrong, and I'll try to, if they occur to me, I'll try to get back to you. I'm just thinking there could be, you know, home for a fox or something, but that's not so bad if you don't mind. There's foxes everywhere anyway. So yeah, as long as they're not too high on the tree trunks, but they'll probably settle down.
I have enough area where I can spread it out.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. That sounds like, because again, in the forest, nobody rakes them up, you know?
Where
They
you're
just,
blowing them into, there's leaves falling in there already and it works just fine. So you're just adding more leaves to that.
yeah. I really want somebody to do a test of people with rakes and people with blowers, and to see, because I just have this hunch, like you see them using the blower over and over and over, and I feel, my instinct is that raking is about the same amount. It's just, yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. But the people that come in and blow, they just seem to keep going over it, chasing single leaves. Yeah. Anyway, yes, I'm sorry, you've had your hand up a lot.
About the lasagna.
Oh, yes,
And I did
I should have brought the
picture
book.
of that, and that must sound silly. Which layer is, there is 5 layers.
Oh.
So which one's on the top? Which
Okay,
one-
yeah, there's not, let's see. It's not an exact science. I think I'm going back to it.
Number 1 is the first layer.
Yeah, the bottom this bottom one would be cardboard, level 1 on the bottom.
Okay.
And then on top of that, I'd put something that's not brown. The cardboard's brown.
Okay.
And then the green, you know, clippings, vegetable scraps, things like this. And then on top of that, you can put another brown layer. And I mean, it depends on how high you want it to go. Some people do it with just, you know, 1 or 2 layers.
You did around the tree trunk.
Yeah. Yeah, those layers were not hugely thick when I put them in that fall, but it ended up being maybe about that high, but within a month it had shrunk down. Yeah, because the weight of the finished compost on top makes it go down. And I just planted bulbs right into it. Actually, I put flower bulbs like daffodils and stuff right around on the top, and then I put the compost over it. So I didn't even have to dig to plant the bulbs. It was really lazy, yeah. And it was good. Okay, thanks. But make sure you leave the flare on your tree if you can. Yeah, Janet.
Okay, so I have these bird feeders. I get lots of shells on the ground. So, okay, get rid of them or?
It depends. I don't know about all bird food, like by far. I don't know about all bird food, but I do know that sunflower seed hulls have certain components in them that inhibit growth. It's kind of like having a black walnut tree. And so if your bird seed has a lot of the sunflower seed hulls, you might want to be careful what it's over. a long time ago on Helpline at Master Gardeners, a call came in, somebody had planted this prized family heirloom, I think it was a hydrangea, that had been in their great-grandmother's house, and somebody had moved it, and they now had it. And it was ailing, it was really dying. And it turned out that there was a bird feeder over it, and it was the sunflower seeds that were affecting it. They moved the shrub, and it recovered just fine. As far as I know, sunflower seed hulls are the only ones that would do that. Yeah, sometimes, especially if you have squirrels around, they're not tidy, so some of the seeds may fall down, and sometimes they sprout too. So, but I don't think that they hurt for the most part. And if it's between plants, you can just, if you don't like how it looks, you can just put a little compost over it or shredded leaves. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else?
So we have quite a few questions online, which we probably won't be able to get to today. But I'll address a couple, but I did want to mention for those online, Louise and I can chat and send you the answers to your questions. We will also send a PDF copy of the resource guide via email, as well as a recording of today's program. So
it's always my horror.
Sorry, I'm just juggling my laptop here. So one question, how do deciduous trees affect the garden?
Oh, well, there's shade, of course. And their leaves are a wonderful resource for us. That's what we've been talking about. They're called deciduous trees because their leaves fall off. And then that's what we're talking about. It's wonderful to use those leaves and keep them on your landscape to contribute nutrients to your soil. And our gardens, we think gardens are all about what we see, you know, the beautiful flowers and the butterflies that land on them. It's actually all about the soil. It's what your gardens are, what you feed the soil, and that's where you get things growing out of them. If that's a vague statement, but that's
great. Yeah. And one final question, because I think it's a good one. How do we navigate discussions with landscapers about our leaves who claim that this will put them out of business?
Okay, Christine from Sustainable Princeton has her hand raised. You want to come up here, or?
Sure.
So you can be seen by those at home. I love that you're taking this because I'm not really sure. You know, there are Spanish instructions you can get, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I want to say what's really important is when we think about the landscaping community, they're very hard workers. And what we've come to understand is there are probably over 100 different landscaping companies that do business in our area. And majority of them are small, one owner, two crews, with maybe 4 or 5 employees or crew members that they have working for them. And they operate on very narrow margins. And the sort of the paradigm of their practice is what's called a mow, blow, and go crew. And that is been driven by the consumer's paradigm of a manicured lawn. So if we want to change the landscaping business, we have to understand that homeowners and property owners are co-responsible for this change. And what we've been trying to do over the past couple of years is to facilitate dialogues between property owners and the landscaping community to sort of co-create a new type of way that we manage our properties. One thing that we've done is put together a little bit of a toolkit or so with some common phrases in Spanish that you can use to communicate to your landscaper. You need to understand the folks that may be coming to your property are probably not the foreman or the person in charge. It may be just the crew that day. So you may want to talk directly to the landscaper that you hire. They probably do speak English, so you can have a dialogue with them. Another thing that we've done at Sustainable Princeton is we've been reaching out to the landscaping community and encouraging them to adopt these practices. And we have a sustainable landscaper list on our website. So we've sent out a questionnaire to all the landscapers that we know of that are doing business, because through just going out and seeing what trucks are around town, finding who's registered with the municipality. Side note, if you hire a landscaper in the municipality of Princeton, please make sure they are registered. It is required that they register with the municipality, and this was put in place as a means to try to reduce wage theft. This is something we heard from the landscaping community that they wanted, and they want the town to enforcement, because there are many good businesses out there trying to do the right thing. And they also asked that the town require proof of workers' compensation insurance. So we can do our part if you hire a landscaper to make sure they're registered. And you can look on our website to see a list of landscapers that will mulch your leaves, leave your leaves, that will offer these type of services. So I just really want to get the point across. We need to respect the landscaping community, not demonize them because of the practices they may have or the equipment that they use, and see ourselves as, if we're a property owner and we're hiring landscapers, our neighbors are hiring the landscapers, that they are part of the solution. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christine.
A tiny bit more about dealing with your landscapers. I have found that some landscapers are resistant to mulch mowing, to leaving the grass clippings in the lawn, to mulch mowing. And again, you just need to try to understand it from their perspective. If more and more and more of us ask for that, then they'll make it. But sometimes they have to adjust their equipment from household to household, or managed property to managed property. And that can be confusing. Also, they tend to mow, unless it's pouring rain, if your lawn's a little bit wet, they're probably going to come mow it anyway, because they have a tight schedule. If they're successful because of that low profit margin, they've got to get it done. And if they're mulching when it's a little bit wet, sometimes there's lumps left, and some people will complain about that. Others of us love it because it's proof that they're, mulching the grass clippings in. So that's my little warning. But I think it's really important for to contact your homeowners associations and your, I don't know what the others, the property management companies. We can do things as homeowners, but it'd be great if these other places could work on this too. Okay, so that's it.
Thank you so much, Louise. Now, I know the sun is out, and now I'm going to do the drawing for the leaf blower. So here it is.
Oh, is that it? Thank you.
All right. We have a Michelle.
Woohoo! Yes!
All right.
It's a good omen.
So now you're going to just rake them into the woods so you can give it to me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
The Shrek.
Yeah, that one shred, so we will have demonstration following this presentation.
Yeah, so we have a demonstration, the green pen out there, if you want to see this in action. And we also will have our leaf corral workshop in this room in a few minutes as well.